All right, everybody, we're back. Hello and welcome to the Wildcast podcast. This is Michael Lev, senior writer and columnist for the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com. I'm joined today by Bruce Pascoe, my colleague who covers the Arizona men's basketball team, which is ranked number 2 in the country and is your Big 12 regular season champion for 2025-2026, second year in the league. The Wildcats have won what many consider to be the best conference in the country. Bruce, how are you?
Pretty good. It's essentially one game week now that I played on Monday, so that makes it a little bit, you can kind of breathe a little bit these couple of days here.
Yeah, we found time to squeeze in a podcast. Bruce will be headed to Boulder, Colorado this weekend for the last regular season road trip of the year. It is the regular season finale, and we'll talk a little bit about that game toward the end of the pod here. But I want to start, Bruce, with, the big event that happened on Monday, the celebration, all of that stuff. How big a deal is it in your mind winning the Big 12 regular season title compared to all of the other accomplishments of, Arizona basketball over the last, 30 years or so?
Wow. I mean, I think a little bit differently probably than a lot of fans would think. I think it's a really big deal. This is like you said, probably the best conference, at least on the top nationally. And they've won it. They might win it by, a couple games if they win out Saturday. That's a huge accomplishment. And, I think, but, college basketball is defined by the postseason and how well you do in the tournament. And, it's funny, over the years, you're like, oh, that 2000, whatever, Arizona, that was the Elite Eight team, or that was the Sweet 16 team. Like, nobody ever talks about the conferences. And I think back in the Pac-10 days, certainly, and even in a lot of the Pac-12, it wasn't that big a deal because there was like maybe 2 or 3 really good teams. This league is loaded. And so for them to win it is a pretty big accomplishment. And I think, to me, it's winning this league. To me, the way I look at it with as loaded as it is, winning this league, by the way, they did, probably to me is the equivalent of a Final Four, because you're better than a bunch of teams that could be in the Final Four and might be in the Final Four. But that said, they could lose in the Sweet 16 again. Who knows? They could lose in the second round. It depends on the matchups. And that's the thing. The funny thing is, as you know, like you even as a number one, you've got three pretty potentially really tough games to play, and it can happen. And sometimes those seasons get judged on that. It is what it is. But, at least I think this is pretty significant. I don't know if people agree with that or not. I get the sense just from some people I've talked to, they're still talking about, is this going to be a Final Four team? How are we going to do? Whatever. I think it deserves to look in the moment and say, wow, this is what this team did. If you're an Arizona fan, I think this is a pretty big deal.
I agree. I would say that the season will be judged on the NCAA tournament, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They've set the expectations so high with how good they've been this regular season. I feel like anything short of the Final Four will be viewed by fans and anyone who supports the program as a disappointment, which is unfortunate because it's really hard to get to a Final Four, but that's the reality.
It will be. I agree completely that that's how it will be judged. I'm just saying that, it should be judged more on the regular season. And I've felt that way for a long time, just covering these seasons, because I see the grind. I travel everywhere where they go. I know what it takes. I've seen what, and then the tournament is different and it's higher pressure, but it's only 3 or 4 games. This is 18 or 20 games, and it's just a different deal. But again, yeah, like you say, it doesn't get judged like that.
Nope. And I think everyone is aware of that who is involved in Arizona men's basketball, Tommy Lloyd included. He would probably never really talk about that sort of thing because he's always in that, game by game, one day at a time kind of mode, which is the way you have to be. But there is a certain randomness to college basketball that is unique to that sport. There's no best of 7. I mean, I think I'd take Arizona against just about anybody if there was a best of 7 series to decide, each round of the playoffs, but when you're in a one-off, anything can happen.
Right.
So going back to Monday night, I went downstairs at the conclusion of the game because I needed to ask TJ Otzelberger a couple questions for some things that I'm working on. So I did not see much of the celebration that took place on court. Players and Tommy Lloyd addressing the fans, cutting down the nets. They got T-shirts, they got hats, they got a trophy. It was a whole thing. What did you make of just that entire scene at McHale? Was it a little over the top? Was it something that was totally deserved? Like, let the kids celebrate? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I thought it was right on point. I think Tommy actually apologized because he didn't script it too well because he didn't want to. I think obviously the operations people had a plan. I was told before the game that they were going to do this and they were going to do that and pass the mic around. But if they lost, they weren't going to do anything. And I think that's the approach Lloyd took, was like, hey, I'm not going to plan anything. You just tell, if we win, tell me what to do or whatever. I think that's what happened. And so it was a little bit, some of the players ran by the Zona Zoo and kind of slapped high fives or whatever, fist bumps, and some of the fans on the front row. And then Tommy Lloyd did pass the mic around, and then I think nobody seemed to have any real speeches in mind, but a couple of them, like I think Evan Nelson would kind of like pause for a second, then he's like, because he's from here, he said Tucson's the best city with the best fans or something like that. And, so it seemed to be, I think that the good thing is probably that it was pretty genuine and unrehearsed for that reason, whereas I think you saw back, I remember 1 year with in the Miller era that, the players ran through the Zona Zoo and they went all the way up and all the way down. And I don't think that was planned by, I think from what I remember, the players actually had planned that. So I don't know. But anyway, this was just kind of spur of the moment. And I don't think it was over the top. It seemed like, the kind of thing you would see at a home game, and then the nets and all that. And, that's what you get. If you can win it on your home court, then you got a chance to do that. I remember 2 years ago, they won it at Poly Pavilion in a tiny little locker room. I'm sure you've been there, Michael. And a little high hallway, and Richard Jefferson was doing the game for ESPN, and he came over and sang with them or something. And but that's nothing compared to, I would think, nothing compared to being able to celebrate at McHale with your own people.
Yeah, big difference winning it at home versus on the road. I was also impressed, and it wasn't really talked about very much after the game, but I was impressed that the team didn't experience any kind of letdown whatsoever after having that kind of really, that Kansas game that had been circled on the calendar, which is 48 hours earlier. The crowd, same way. Like, I think really good crowd, really energized. So credit all around to everyone who was involved in that. Going way back to the beginning of the season, if you look at the preseason poll conducted by the coaches in the league, they picked Arizona to finish 4th.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what we knew then, do you think that was fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I would have thought they were the same, and think I had them 14th nationally, and they were picked 13th. And the reason why is because Tommy Lloyd had never started a freshman. You knew he'd have to start at least one, and freshman, you knew Cole Pete and Braden Burries, they had all this or that, but you never really know until the freshmen show up. Mm-hmm. And I think anybody who watched this team the first month of the season was probably thinking, well, I don't know about this Burries kid, mm-hmm. and he was really struggling. So, so all these things came together. And then Ivan Karchenkov, who, was kind of known, I think, within coaching circles, but nobody really knew him. Still nationally, he doesn't get a lot of talk, mm-hmm. but he's been really, really good on both ends of the court. And, he played at a high level. So all these things sort of happened and developed, and I don't think you could have anticipated it back in October. I said, I believe, I don't know if we talked about it on podcast, but I know I have, and others, that I always felt that this team had probably the highest ceiling, but I thought the floor was also much lower because you just didn't know which way some things mm-hmm. were going to go. And then besides the freshmen, you also didn't know how is Tobe Awaka and Anthony Delorso going to handle being off the bench. Is Mo Krivas really going to be what he's going to be, especially after a year immobile? There's a lot of questions back then. So I think in retrospect, if you go back there, I think it makes a lot of sense. But obviously they've not only hit that ceiling that I thought, but probably even been beyond that. And that is a surprise. But, it's one of those things that happens. And again, that's why I think if you're an Arizona fan, you should be, pretty excited to see what's happening with this team.
Yeah, in addition to Arizona being picked fourth in the preseason poll, which again, it's impossible to know what's going to happen. No one can read the future, predict the future accurately. Krivas has been so much better on both ends of the court than probably anybody envisioned. Burries has just gotten better and better as the season has gone along, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll talk a little bit more about some specific players as we go here, but there were 0 Arizona players on the preseason All Big 12 team, which I think was 10 players deep. Do you think that was fair?
Well, I think probably the one guy you might have looked at that point maybe would be Jaden Bradley, but I think the problem was his stats were kind of underwhelming. He's subtle, and I think the team was so much about Caleb Love and the numbers wise anyway. And so, and this is the thing with the Big 12, when you say all conference team, is like, this is a huge conference. This is not the Pac-10 or the Pac-12 even. This is 16 teams, 6 or 7 of which are really, really good. So, and aren't, and a lot of them aren't. And then the other thing, of course, is that a lot of them aren't as balanced as Arizona. And I think, going in, you kind of knew that this would be balanced. I mean, maybe Tobe Awaka might have had an argument for that because he was honorable mention last year, but he wasn't, but I think, the guys coming back, and then, maybe Koa Pete you could have argued to put him on there. Like you put people put Dibonsa on there, but I think, there's just, some questions about how it was going to come together, who was going to merge for Arizona, and, a lot of other good players around the league. So not a huge surprise that didn't happen. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the postseason teams, which will come out next week. Will Bradley beyond that, despite not having overwhelming stats, but really leading this team in so many ways. I think the coaches generally will recognize that. And I would be surprised if he's not on there, but but there's a number of other players that could be on there as well. And, it's crazy because it's almost like with 16 teams and that much depth that, they should have like two 5-man all league teams. And it's just a huge league.
They should probably go 3 deep, honestly, and have 15 guys. So I would say that Tommy Lloyd is the favorite for coach of the year, right? Considering where they were picked and what they've done. I'd be shocked if he didn't win that. Arizona will not have the player of the year, though, in the conference. There's just no way, because that's a kind of a statistically driven award. It's probably going to be Dibonsa, one would guess. I mean, he's the leading scorer in the league. I know their team performance has fallen off since the Richie Saunders injury, among other injuries, happened. But I would be very surprised if there weren't a handful of Arizona players on the All Big 12 team when it comes out. Right.
Yeah. I think that's right.
I would say Bradley Burries and Krivas would be probably my top 3 based on a variety of statistical measures and impact on the game and so forth. I could see Pete getting some consideration as well. Tobe Awaka probably will be sort of underestimated because he doesn't score that much. Everyone's always focused on scoring. But you got to give the best team in the league some spots on the all league team, right?
Well, I think, and I think it's important to note that these postseason awards are coach voted, and coaches tend to think a little differently. So I think they'll give a guy like Awaka might get honorable mention again, even though he's a reserve. He might get, I think he would have a great case for 6th man of the year, but I believe there's a quasi starter out there somewhere who's been playing off the bench. And so anyway, Yeah, no, I think they'll recognize that. But and so a lot of times if it's close, they'll give it to the player on the team that wins, and they'll maybe give that team a couple other advantage. So I think you're right. I think they'll get a few guys in those all league teams, but probably not player of the year just because they're so spread, so balanced. And that happened. I remember some of the really great Lute Olson era teams were also really balanced, and they'd win the league by 3 games, and some guy from Cal who finished fifth would be player of the year. And then that happens, and that's just the way it is. And then also because, and this probably won't happen this year, but sometimes the coach of the year goes to the coach who overachieved. Unlike the player of the year who achieved, the coach of the year tends to go to the coach who overachieved, was picked the lowest. So, but I think with Arizona being picked fourth, I got to think Tommy Lloyd's probably a pretty safe bet for that. But if Arizona had been picked first because they had all these NBA prospects or whatever, maybe TJ Alsaberger might have got it because they were, picked third or something. I don't know, but it's funny how these awards work sometimes.
Yeah, I think Tommy's a shoe-in for that one. So I do want to do a little bit of a deep dive here into some stats, some numbers that I was researching before the pod. I have not briefed Bruce on any of these, so he has no idea what's coming his way. Bruce, among the top 25 scorers in the Big 12, how many Arizona Wildcats do you think are in that top 25?
Top 25?
Top 25 scorers, points per game, Big 12 play. All Big 12 games, conference and non-conference. How many Arizona Wildcats in that?
3, probably.
How about 1?
Yeah.
How about 1? That would be Braden Burries at number 18. Which to me says so much about this team. The number 25, by the way, is Jop of Arizona State at 13.9. Arizona has a clump of players who average basically between 9 and 13 and a half points, except for Braden Burries, who's kind of separated himself a little bit. But that's Arizona under Tommy Lloyd, right? I mean, they had Caleb Love last year, who's, a volume shooter, scorer type, but in general, right, it's all about sharing the ball. It's about having balance. To me, that really sort of symbolizes what his teams are about. And that's share the ball. Everybody eats. Could be, the players talked about this the other night, like could be anyone on any given night who is kind of the lead dog. And that makes them hard to play against.
Yeah, it's funny. Every team loves to say that, but it's not usually true. And it really is about this team. I mean, they literally can beat teams at any position, except arguably you could say if you really clogged up the paint and got Owaka and Krivas in foul trouble and blah, 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 and whatever, maybe force them to shoot some threes or something. And Arizona had a bad day shooting threes. Maybe that's a possibility, but and it might happen, or whatever. But no, they're extremely well balanced. I think that first team that Tommy Lloyd had in 21-22, I think was second in the country in assisted baskets, the percentage of baskets that were assisted. So that he started that off the bat. It was visible that way. I think that team though had a little more unbalance because Mathurin was such a big scorer outside and then Tubelis inside. But that sort of framework or template or whatever was there. And now I think this team has a little more balance and talent than even that team did.
All right. So there are 3 Wildcats in the top 25 in the Big 12 in free throw percentage. Which player do you think is atop that list among the 3? Who has the highest free throw percentage among Arizona Wildcat players?
I would have said Jaden Bradley until about 3 games ago. I don't know if he is anymore. Probably is Burries now.
You know who it is? It's Mo Krivas.
Oh, yeah.
How about that? Mo Krivas, who is a 7'2" center, and look, over the long history of the sport of basketball, usually 7-foot centers don't shoot free throws as well as like 6'5" 3 or 4 guards do, right?
Yeah,
Krivas
that is right.
is really good. And that jumped out to me as a very sort of surprising and noteworthy stat. He will get fouled a lot. He obviously draws a lot of contact. Some would argue that he probably should get more free throw attempts than he actually does because he's so big and strong and people might bounce off of him. But that jumped out to me that Krivas has actually got the highest free throw percentage on the team. Bradley number 2 and Burry's number 3.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. Probably should be something we talk more about, especially because you're right. He will get fouled. I think just looking at it now, he's not shooting. He's shooting. Yeah, he's actually at the 3rd most attempts too, although it's really close with him and Awaka and Ko-Pete. But that's significant for a 7-footer.
So to further the case, to me, for Mo Krivas making the All Big 12 team, there are 2 Wildcats who are in the top 6 in the league in rebounding. One is Toby Awaka at number 3. The second is Mo Krivas at number 6. He is 4th in the league in blocked shots per game at 1.8. And I know that there are other defensive measures that show his impact probably even better than that. I was looking at Sports Reference. They do a defensive rating statistic, and number 1 in the Big 12 among all players, that would be Mo Krivas. Toby Awaka was number 2 in Sports Reference's defensive rating system. They also do something called win shares, which I'm sure many basketball fans are familiar with. They break it down by win shares per 40 minutes. Number 1 in the Big 12 in win shares per 40 minutes is Toby Awaka. Number 2 is Mo Krivas. So clearly you can see the impact that those veteran bigs have on the game, even if sometimes it doesn't show up in some of the more traditional statistics. Those guys have a presence that is notable and noteworthy and palpable when you watch Arizona play.
Right. I think Krivas, I think there's with that stat of shots changed or something, which is a little more subjective or whatever. And, but I would imagine if you track that he would be really high, much higher than even blocking. Cause he's not like he blocks shots, but that's not like his thing. Like, that's not like his big thing. I mean, he's like even compared to like a Christian Koloko, who was probably more of a guy who could do that. I think he's just more of a presence around the basket. And when you go in there, you're just like, wait, do I really want to go in here and mess with this guy? And then maybe you pull up, or you pass it, or you do something else, or you change the way your shot's going to be. All those things are little subtle things that don't go in the box score. And I think he's significant there. So I think those metrics, like you pointed out, I think Evan Mia has another one where Krivas is by far the most defensive, by far the best defensive rating on the team. And it's interesting because that Naismith Defensive Player of the Year award watch list got down to 15, and they had Jaden Bradley on it. And Bradley's a very good defensive player, but on this team, Krivas is probably, different kinds of defense, obviously a big guy versus a point guard, but you could argue that Krivas is the guy who, if they're only going to be one guy, there's maybe Krivas is the guy who should be on that list.
Yeah, Tommy talked about how he challenged Krivas in the offseason to become more of a defensive presence.
Yeah.
Obviously, that message was well received, and he has done that. The other thing he does really well, you mentioned altering the shots. He does a great job of staying vertical so that he is not called for fouls in those situations, right? And when you're a legit 7'2", and like some guys are maybe listed at 7'2", and they're really not, but he is, like, he has to duck whenever he comes into the media room to get through the door. When you are 7'2" and you hold your arms up like this, and you can stay vertical, that's hard. It's hard to shoot over that. It's hard to score over that. And it doesn't always show up, like you said, in block shots, but block shots altered, right? Shots changed, shots affected.
Right.
He's done a lot of that this year.
Right. And that's a good point. And it makes me wonder too. And I don't know there's a correlation, but you wonder if because he's so good at that and emphasizes that, does he do that more often than maybe there's a shot where he thinks he could just outright block it, but he doesn't want to risk lunging and then picking up a foul? And so that, maybe that's a little subtlety that you don't see as well, but that is a really good point that, that I think probably is underappreciated, that he's been out of foul trouble for the most part, because of the way he plays like that. And that's, again, that's something too we talked about before, what this team was expected to at the beginning of the year. I mean, literally, Krivas played a small, role, 12 minutes a game as a freshman. Didn't really, we weren't really sure which way he was going to go. Probably was really high rated coming in, and then maybe it looked like, he wasn't going to be that guy. And then last year struggled early, was probably more hurt than he let on when he got cleared and played 8 games, and then he's out. So what is he going to be? Nobody really knew. And I'm sure the coaches knew behind the scenes maybe, but we didn't. And so he's been better, like you said, on both sides of the floor than I think anybody could have expected. But I also think that those expectations were reasonable based on what he had shown or been able to show.
Another way that you can measure the impact of Krivas and Awaka is if you look at rebounding margin. And this is like laughable. The overall rebounding margin for Arizona is plus 11.8 for all games. The next closest team in the Big 12, Bruce, is at 4.6. So nearly 3 times the margin per game on the glass. If you go, it's Big 12 games only, it's still a huge disparity. It's 9.7 versus 4.4. And that's the dirty work. There's not a lot of glamour in that, but Tommy has been able to sell the idea of selflessness, right? Like putting the team above yourself, acceptance of roles. You were asking, Toby Awaka and Anthony Delorso about this after the game. Yeah. Those guys moving from the starting lineup to the bench, and they don't seem to care that they're not starting, or maybe they don't get as many shots or whatever. They're just interested in contributing to the team concept. Iowa State was actually out rebounding Arizona in that game until Toby Awaka came in, and then they weren't anymore. And Toby ended up with 15 right. boards. 15 boards in that game. We've talked many times about all of his various rebounding rates. I mean, he is the best rebounder in the sport. But I just love the attitude that those guys have about what their roles are. I think that's really meaningful, and it says a lot about the culture that Tommy has created, and it seems to really be a huge part of this team's success.
Absolutely. I think, probably Arizona fans see that. I feel like I've written about it a lot, maybe too much, but to me, that kind of chemistry and role acceptance has been as important as anything with this team. I mean, I think most people maybe nationally with the big picture view look at like, wow, they're really big, they're inside out, and they're terrific this way, or Krivas, whatever. And that those are important things. But the fact that they got these roles together, especially, I think, that's always been the case in college basketball because you had a lot of turnover, but I think it's especially important now in the NIL era because so many teams turn over half or more of their roster every year. And at the same time, sometimes guys might be making more money than the other guy and they're upset about that, or it causes friction. All these little things that we don't even know about behind the curtain could be going on. And you don't see that with Arizona. You see a bunch of guys who generally seem to like each other. You can see by the way they play. There's been years here where you'd see a guy, on an inbounds that didn't get the ball and he'd give a dirty look to the inbounder. Just little things like that don't seem to happen with this team. And so, yeah, I think it's a pretty big deal. I mean, you could go around even within the Big 12 and say, well, this team had, all this talent and they're underachieving. Why is that? And, a lot of times it is because of chemistry, things didn't fit right or fit, and they've got that.
It's an impossible thing to quantify unless maybe you just look at the wins and losses, right? Or the fact that there's only one Arizona player in the top 25 in scoring, and they're far and away the best team in the league. Maybe those things just sort of, symbolize the chemistry that this team has. Some other reasons that Arizona has won the league, if you look at some team stats, Arizona's number one in points per game, scoring margin, field goal percentage, free throw attempts. I mentioned rebounding margin before. Number two in defensive field goal percentage, defensive three-point percentage, and steals. They're actually, surprisingly enough, we know this, but others might be surprised to hear it. They're actually number 6 in three-point field goal percentage offensively, which is just not bad, right? It's fine. They are comically last in three-point field goal attempts per game. They average 5.9 three tries per contest. The next closest in the league is 7.4.
Well, and
We've
what's
talked about it many times, and they don't need to do it to win.
right. Well, what's significant about that is that's not even pace adjusted. And this for a team that has probably quite a few more possessions per game than the average team, and still is way low. So, if you look at that, the one stat I always quote is the KenPom stat of just percentage of threes taken as a percentage of overall, and all season they've been among the last 5 to 8 teams in all of Division I, like 300 teams. I think right now they're 363. I mean, it's insane. Only 27% of the time when they take a shot is it a 3-pointer, and that's, like you said, they don't need to. They're happy going inside and out, and they're happy shooting mid-range shots. They're pretty efficient, with those, even though those can be the most inefficient ways to score in basketball. So it's really interesting that way, and it makes them a little more. We'll see. With the tournament, you never know. Maybe something out, but it does tend to make them maybe a little more resilient. I think that they're not going to be as likely to be subject to having to hit a bunch of threes, because they can win in so many different ways.
Right. They are, according to Sports Reference, they have the third fastest pace in the Big 12. That is an estimate of possessions per 40 minutes. I'm going to see if I can find that 3-point percentage stat here on Sports Reference, which I've been able to find in the past. Maybe it's under leaders here. This is a high level podcasting here, Bruce. In addition to like me having to clear my throat in the middle of talking, and now I popped in a Halls here to try to alleviate that problem. I was interviewing Desiree Reed-Francois over the phone the other day, and that happened to me while I was talking to her too. And she's like, "Are you okay?" Like, "Yes, I'm fine." Just a little like lingering. Yes, like I call it lingering phlegm. That just hasn't gone away. A 3-point attempt rate.
Yeah.
Here we go. Who do you think, by the way, is number 1 in the country in 3-point attempt rate?
In the country?
Yes. It's someone that Arizona played this year.
Oh, man.
Coach that Arizona has played against. It's been kind of their nemesis over the last few years in some ways.
I mean, I'm so focused. That's hard for me to think of.
It's Alabama.
I was thinking, the
Alabama and Nate Oates. They take 54.4% of their shots from 3, followed by VMI, Louisville, Army, and Cal Poly. And then you go all the way down. Out of 365 teams that are on this list, Arizona is number 363 at 27.1% of their attempts being from beyond the arc. So There it is. Right there. They don't need to do it. And as you mentioned, when you rely so much on the 3, there's some volatility baked into that, right? Like if you're counting on that and you go cold in a given game, that might be the day that your luck runs out. Whereas with Arizona, they like to go inside. They get to the foul line. I mean, that was like an ugly game against Iowa State. As Tommy mentioned, like it was hard to score against them, but they got to the foul line a bunch.
Right.
And I think they were like 23 of 25 or something from the stripe, and should be a lot easier to make those shots than from beyond the arc. They're closer. No one's guarding you. Of course, there's pressure in those situations, but I would much rather rely on that than rely on the 3-point shot.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think they'll be more resilient, and they have been, and they should be in the NCAA tournament because of that. Yeah, scoring inside, free throws. They like to quote, and it still keeps holding up that they've made more threes than their opponents have even tried.
Free throws.
So and free throws. Excuse me. Yeah, and then they can. I think they're, like I said, I think they're decent in the mid range too. And then when they need to shoot threes, usually they're okay. And they, I think that's been sort of the, if you're nitpicking at them, I think that's the one thing you're like, that they, that I think Del Orto had that streak where he really struggled in January, but even he's come back and been, really, really efficient for them from three. And if that continues, it's hard to see a weakness with them right now.
Yeah, they have some very cool stats on Sports Reference. I don't know if you've ever kind of gone down that rabbit hole with baseball or basketball or football, but it's so fun to look at that. It reminds me of when I was a kid, and just show how nerdy I was, Bruce. Like, I would sometimes just have remember the baseball encyclopedia, that big book it was basically just like everybody's career stats. I'd sometimes just flip through that when I'm before bed, just flipping through my baseball encyclopedia, as one does.
I used to get the sporting news and just look at box scores, because there was no internet, and and there's just things that you saw in printed stats that you can kind of soak up. And then I think it's been interesting since we were kids how stats have evolved. There's so much more analytics now, and I love Ken Palm and Evan Mia, really the way they dive into the analytics. I think it really tells you a different level, I think, sometimes too.
It does. I was looking at this stat that they call total rebound percentage. This is an estimate of the percentage of available rebounds grabbed while players are on the floor. Arizona is number 5 in the country in that stat at 57.9%. It's interesting if you look at the top 10, who some of these teams are. Yeah. Florida is number 1. Florida is a legit national championship contender. I think they're a lot better now than they were when Arizona played them at the start of the season. St. Mary's is on this list. St. Mary's just knocked off Gonzaga. They're really tough. Duke is number 6. Illinois is number 7. Michigan is number 10. So, hey, something to be said for rebounding. I know that's
overall rebounding percentage. Yes. Yeah. So, and Ken Palm just breaks it up like offensive rebound percentage, defensive rebound. I think they're 4th in offensive and 21st in defensive. So that sounds right. Yeah.
All right. So let's exit sports nerd corner here and look ahead to the finale of the regular season at Colorado. This feels like something of a trap game. I maybe feel stronger about that if Colorado was better this year. I mean, this is not peak Colorado, but do you agree that it kind of has that feel a little bit to it? I remember a couple of years ago, after they beat UCLA to clinch the regular season title, and they were, on this LA road trip, man, they played kind of a dog of a game against USC to wrap up the regular season. So do you think something like that could happen again, or do you think they'll be able to reset, refocus, and put their best effort out there?
Yeah, I mean, normally I would think that this would be a trap game. It's just hard to, in fact, the team, I think Lloyd referred to it the other day, his first team, it's pretty much blitzed over the Pac-12. They went to Colorado. I think that was the last regular season game they lost. And, it was a pretty good Colorado team, but it was still a pretty big upset that they were able to get them there. So so yes, I mean, this qualifies as the definition of a trap game because they just won the league and they're going into Big 12 and they got to be feeling good about themselves. They got, a little bit of a lull here with 4 games to go. And then you go up to Boulder and it's mile high elevation and nobody likes to talk about that, but it can be a factor. Substitution patterns, sometimes coaches change them a little bit because they don't want their guys to feel tired or whatever. And I think, I don't know what seniors they got or whatever, but it's their last game. They've had kind of a disappointing season. They're coming off a pretty good win at Utah though last night. So they'll be ready. I mean, and Tad Boyle, he doesn't always have the top shelf talent, but I think as an in-game coach, I think he's pretty well regarded. So that is a little bit of a concern, but I think it's just hard to say all that with the way this Arizona team has been. They've been pretty focused all year. They haven't had those kind of classic letdowns you haven't really seen that. I think, I thought Baylor, when they played at Baylor, that was kind of a potential trap game because that was between Houston and Kansas, and it was a second game. And on the Texas trip, they had sat around. Plus, they had, of course, a couple injuries. Plus, they had Del Orso was nursing an ankle. I just thought that game was, and Baylor had been really underachieved. In fact, we were talking earlier about teams that maybe have not fit their chemistry or their roles right. Baylor is a classic example of that. They have a lot of talent, and they just haven't been able to get it together. So I just thought that game that Arizona could be in trouble. And granted, they didn't blow them away, but they did win that, well enough. So it's hard to say that, that Arizona could just overlook this because they haven't done that all year. But, that said, I think they're aware that going up there will be difficult. And I think they've got the motivation probably in the back of their minds. If they really want to hold on to firmly that number one seed, they should make sure they win this, because if they win this game, I would think it would guarantee, even if they lost in the quarterfinals of the Big 12, that they'd still be number one. But if they lose this game and in the quarterfinals, and the likelihood of that is not terribly likely, but that could endanger that number one line. And that, people say it doesn't matter sometimes, but it really does, because you play that. If you're a number one seed, you basically get a free pass that first game. Not sometimes it's a little scary, but most of the time it's a free pass, and that makes your tournament run a little bit easier.
Sure. You never know what'll happen in conference play. I don't consider any road trip to be easy in the Big 12. If you look at the slate on Tuesday, there were 6 games. The underdogs, the betting line underdogs, won 5 of those games outright. So you never know what will happen in a game. It's also, I didn't realize this, Bruce, but 9:00 tip off.
Yeah, I realized.
Up in Boulder, I'm sure you're just elated about that development. Yeah. So with the time change, the time changes the next day. So will you gain an hour when you come back here? Do I have that right?
I'm not coming back, but yeah.
You're not. Okay, you're going straight to KC.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how it works. I guess I would actually gain.
You would have if you had come back, yeah.
Which would be nice, because wait, no, you losing. See, I don't even know. I've lived here so long, I don't even know how it works. You were in California probably soon.
We don't change the clock. We don't change the clocks here in Arizona.
That's what I mean. So what happens there? We're going to go ahead, so I'll lose an hour.
Here's what you need to know. Okay, there's a 1 hour time difference right now between us and Kansas City, where you're going to be next week. But as of Sunday, it'll be a 2 hour difference. So just keep that in mind. Deadlines are sort of irrelevant for us now, the way things work, but just something to note, like when it's 12 o'clock here, it's 2 o'clock there.
Yeah.
Starting on Sunday. So let's just get that.
I will be up till probably 4 a.m. on Saturday, and then it'll be 5, something like that. So yeah.
It doesn't even matter. Are you driving straight down I-70 from Denver to Kansas City, or are you?
No, the flights are actually pretty cheap. So I'm just going to stay in Denver for an extra day, just because it's like, well, if I came back Sunday, I'd have to leave again Monday. So what's the point?
What's the point? Yep.
It'll save us some money too. And we're going to be doing so much work on we're doing our preseason or special section stuff, et cetera. There's voting things to do on Sunday. It's going to be a really busy weekend anyway, no matter where I am. So I figure I might as well just stay there.
This is our March Madness as journalists who cover this sport. Last topic, Bruce, before we let you go, the Big 12 tournament coming up next week. Arizona is going to be the number 1 seed. It's a double bye setup, so you're automatically into the quarterfinals. Is it worthwhile for Arizona to go all out to win this tournament when, as you said, if they take care of business on Saturday night, they're probably guaranteed of being a number 1 seed no matter what happens? When I floated this idea to Otzelberger and Tommy Lloyd after the game the other night, both of them kind of poo-pooed it. They're like, hey, like, we will compete. This is how we're wired. I think I agree with that. I think it's kind of dangerous to get into that mindset of taking a night off. Of course, they'll be second guessed if somebody gets injured. Like, why are we bothering? Why are we doing this? I don't know. To me, you gotta play all out. If there's an opportunity to win a game, no matter what it is, you have to go and try to win it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think they can't help it really, but I think it's always an interesting argument, because if you get that extra day of rest and you've lost a tough one and maybe you're angry and you kind of feel that you just got eliminated and you're going home, that's not a good feeling. And maybe that sticks with you in the NCAA tournament. It might help. And there's been a lot of teams that have gone to the Final Four after losing on Friday or in the semifinals or even earlier. So it does happen. So I think, I don't know. I'm sure if I was a coach, I'd probably say the same thing. No, I'm going to try and win it or whatever. But I think deep down, I got to think that if they played well, at least you want to win that first game on Thursday, or whether they play well and you lose on Friday. I got to think deep down, the coach would probably be okay with that. They just wouldn't ever want to admit that. But however, there is a danger that if you lose that edge, like I think we've talked about this, and so you have this mentality in the back of your mind, well, geez, we might not win, and maybe that's a bad thing. Whereas Arizona, for the most part, they have a mentality they're going to win, no matter what. They feel, I think they feel probably pretty invincible, because the only 2 games they lost, Kansas they lost at full strength, but arguably Pete, who was off that game, was already injured. He just hadn't come out of the game yet, so they weren't totally at full strength for those 2 losses. So they should feel pretty good. And right, if they go into and they say they lose to Iowa State on Friday, with all the Cyclone fans going nuts, which they will. I mean, the fans at least. That could maybe put a little bug in the back of their mind that you don't really like. So yeah, I don't know. I think they'll try and win it. And I think it's funny. Even we had that kind of conversation Tommy Lloyd's first year in 22. They were pretty much a number 1 going to the Pac-12 tournament. Did they need to win it? They won it. They had a good time. I think Coloco said something. He said something. I remember asking about that. He's like, well, we just snip down nets. That's what we do. And that was, to me, that was like the quote of the year. And then, and then they went in, and I think this might've happened anyway. They went in and got a tough seed playing Houston, which was underseeded at 5, playing them in San Antonio, and got beaten pretty soundly in that game. So, and that might've happened anyway. So, I think, yeah, overall you probably want to win it, and I'm sure they'll want to win it. But I don't think they'll be destroyed if they don't.
Yeah, I think the smart approach too is if someone is kind of on the border's edge of being healthy, like if they're in that questionable territory with a sprained ankle or whatever, you probably lean toward holding them out.
Yeah, for sure. I think
situation, right,
and I think Texas Tech did exactly that last year, if I remember right, and Arizona beat them not at full strength, and then
Texas Tech went pretty deep into the NCAA tournament. After that, right?
Yeah. So that is definitely true. I think you want to win, but you don't want to risk anybody. In fact, if Pete wasn't all the way back, if he had a setback or something else like that, if something else like Pete happened, I think maybe they might. You risk a little bit in the sense that you have to wait a little bit because you want that continuity and if a guy is pretty good to have that your regular rotation going. But if it's significant enough, yeah, you need to rest, because the bottom line is, like, these games in the tournament, I know the Big 12, everybody in TV, they make a big deal out of the conference tournaments. They don't, other than the teams that need to win to get in, and maybe a team might go up or down the seed line or whatever, for the most part, or a team on the bubble, but for everybody else, they really don't matter. They're just more games. They're more. It's technically the regular season. Even that's all they are. Regular season games that happen to be back to back on a neutral court. Well, unless you're playing Kansas or Ohio State, it's a neutral court. So it's
obviously a big deal for the low and mid majors who are one bid leagues. I mean, that's how they get into the tournament, and it's a very cool moment when those teams clinch, and it's on ESPN, and it's a huge deal. But for the bigger leagues, you're right. I mean, it's really just kind of an extension of the regular season. It's for TV. It's for so ESPN can have some sort of a sponsored theme, for the week, that kind of thing. But you know what, Bruce? You will get to check out the new glass floor court.
Yeah.
Out there in Kansas City, so that's something. Well, I think it's probably debuted for the women, right?
Women, women are playing on tonight. Yeah. They'll be playing on today. I'm interested in back that. In fact, we haven't had Karchenkov to talk to since they announced that, but he played on a home court that had one of those glass floors.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. Okay. I think that was one of the first. Maybe it was because it's a German company that developed this technology, and they put it on Munich Bayern's floor. And I heard through somebody else that he liked it. It was no problem. But I am, and apparently there's little, minute edges in the glass, so it feels like it doesn't feel slippery. It looks like you just your feet would give out. But they've done a pretty nice job replicating what it would feel like as opposed to any other floor. So we'll see. But
yeah, I would guess that the players do not care what the floor looks like, that they only care about what it feels like, right? Like they don't want to be slipping and falling.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And it's been tested, it's been used elsewhere, and we'll see if there are any complaints after the women's tournament this week. But I'm guessing that they went through all the proper vetting and procedures that they needed to make sure that this was a safe product for the players to perform on.
Yeah, I think they did too. I mean, and you're right. I think last year was like the floor looked like a Gucci bag or something with all those little Big 12
people. It was not popular. People didn't like it.
Yeah. But the players honestly didn't care. And it's like most floors, when you go down and stand on it, yeah, it looks a little different, but not really that much.
It's all about how it looks on TV.
Yeah,
that's what draws all of the complaints and everybody who chimes in on social media. So, well, anyway, hey, thanks to Bruce Pascoe for joining us. Hey, here on the latest episode of the Wildcast podcast. Bruce will have extensive coverage of Arizona's home finale from leading into and coming out of the game Saturday night in Boulder. We will have a special section in Sunday's edition of the Arizona Daily Star previewing the Big 12 tournament, even though when it goes to press, we won't know exactly what all of the matchups are going to be. So, a little creative writing and some workarounds there from Bruce and our crew. We thank everybody, as always, for listening to the Wildcast. You can catch all of our work at Tucson.com. We also have a sports-only version of the app. I strongly encourage anyone out there who hasn't heard about this or isn't familiar with it to check it out. Maybe subscribe to that. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for listening.
It was really fun. Safe travels out there to Boulder and Kansas City. Thanks to everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.